ARTalk one-on-one with Mr. Burgher.
So it's like the cold opens of these videos or podcasts or whatever the heck this is. They're kind of difficult to come up with the idea, the flavor for that. Like the Saturday Night Live cold opens or the different podcasts that do it. I know Conan O'Brien has a friend. Their cold open is basically like the person that they're interviewing does a monologue or something as to why they're friends with Conan O'Brien or whatever, and it's kind of like the introduction to the whole piece. Sometimes it's like chit-chatty, like the Click This podcast, Kevin Nash podcast. It's kind of chit-chatty at the beginning. It's tricky to come up with that sort of content.
I don't think it's necessarily tricky. It just depends on what's going on when we're starting the podcast. I think it isn't our day isn't just revolved around podcasting. So transitioning from what's going on to our real lives into, okay, now we're going to jump into a podcast and start a conversation about something
right
random, which there's a million things going on right now. So we should be able to find something. But for some reason today, it just isn't coming.
The topics could be anywhere.
Well, I think it's fun. It's been fun to explore different topics with you. I feel like we're excited about trying different things within the podcast. Like today, we were talking about a specific video I was watching back in the archives, and I really loved the way you were describing the videos, and it made me think of something fun we could do. And so I think it is exciting to think about all the different topics that we can cover and new ideas that we have. And
there's definitely a lot of new ground that we're attempting to venture down.
Well, and I think it depends on what you want to achieve in the podcast. Like, do you want it to be entertaining, more educational, more enlightening? Like, what do you want the feel to be? What do you want the vibe to be of your podcast?
Well, I think it's got to be educational, but I think it also needs to be kind of laid back and fun and just kind of, more of like shooting the breeze with your people, hanging out, as opposed to something that's more formal or something that's more, scripted and planned. And, there are pieces that are scripted and planned, but
for sure,
whatever.
All right. Well, there you have it, the beginning of Art One-on-One. I'm your pod boss, Nicole Jordan, alongside your professional artist and master educator, Mr. Burgher.
Trying to keep it together through the holiday season, as we're kind of the tail end of the holiday season now. We got one of the new season, new iteration, I don't know, under our belts. Now we're on to number 2 of the new cycle. I don't know.
Comeback.
Yeah, the comeback.
The
comeback tour.
Yeah.
I have a book. I have notes. I have things planned and thought out, although I can't really always find my glasses. So.
Well, the last podcast, you had your glasses on. Huh?
I said jeepers. I can't get my...
I'm going to take that part out. Well, I've got my glasses on, and I am going to move into our first segment, which is called Brushstrokes or Bluffs.
Brushstrokes or Bluffs. This is the segment where you try to see if I know the difference between a folklore, a bluff, or something that's actually legit from the art world.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull in. So last podcast, we talked a lot about Salvador Dali and his personality and his art pieces. So Salvador Dali's self-portraits are serious explorations of his psyche. It's often assumed that Dali's self-portraits, like his works, are deeply psychological and reflect his surreal inner world.
I would say that is true. Yes. From my experience, based upon what I know of Salvador Dali, as we talked a little bit about last week, He is interested in Sigmund Freud. He's interested in psychiatry and psychology. He's interested in the inner workings of the mind, the deep things, and he ingrains those pieces into his self-portraits. I believe that is a brushstroke.
This is hard because I agree with you, but that is in my research a myth.
A myth. Okay. Well,
and here's why.
Here's what they say.
You can argue or agree with it.
Here's what the so-called experts say.
Yes. Dali's self-portraits, such as his whimsical soft self-portrait with fried bacon in 1941, were more about theatricality and self-promotion than deep introspection. He deliberately exaggerated features and elements to create a larger-than-life persona, blending reality with surrealism.
For sure, but but that doesn't dispute the fact. I mean, even though it's a bit phony baloney, even though it's a little bit theatrical, that's who Salvador Dali was. He was theatrical. He was interested in anybody that does any level of research on Dali knows that he was engrossed in the ideas of Sigmund Freud, to the point that he was stalking Sigmund Freud, that he would try to correspond with Sigmund Freud. He did drawings and artworks of Sigmund Freud. He believed that Sigmund Freud's head was in the shape of a snail. And he believed that the snail was a superior being. Again, it had the hard shell of it, but the squishy inside. He loved the hard, the soft, and the But anyway, I think you can slice different things different way. I don't dispute that it was theatrical. I don't dispute the fact that it was probably a lot of show. As we said before, he was a self-promoter. I think I acknowledged that very bluntly last time, but I also think that he was also giving some insights to something legitimate.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like based on the research I did about him for our last video, and then, Art 101, the video that you have, it seemed like it's definitely a mixture. All his self-portraits were definitely a mixture of psyche, inner reality, things that were going on with him deeply, emotionally, all of those things, but yet also, I think it's a combination of all of those things. So I think it's interesting. What's interesting is I pulled that off of AI. So I plugged in, give me a myth, and I kind of wanted it to be around Salvador Dali.
Now, you do realize that sometimes AI...
Well, and that's kind of why I picked this one specifically, because it so speaks to the fact of technology, like we were talking about last week, and it's not always right.
Right. Well, and to give an example, I was doing some research on for my classes, even for what I'm doing on social media right now. There is a new short that I'm putting together that kind of focuses on what's happening, different weeks and excuse me, things like that. Just looking at week by week, today in art history kind of a deal. And in those, I was doing some research on the very specific dates, and it kicked back. I did an AI search, and AI told me that a certain artist died on a certain day. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. And so I kicked back, because I was looking in January, February, something of this nature. And it said that this artist had died in January or February. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure that artist died in December. And then they came back and said, oh yeah, my mistake. You were right. And
it's interesting that you say they.
Well, I don't know. It's not a him or a her, so I'm only assuming AI would be a it. Anyway, it says whatever.
Right, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it said I was right. So I fixed AI.
There you go.
And I also asked AI, why it is that Mr. Burgher was America's favorite art teacher. And it told me. It told me exactly why.
Speaking of self-promotion.
Well, wouldn't have it any other way.
What was the answer?
Well, it said that I in fact was America's favorite art teacher because of my reach in social media, but also the things that I do within my own community to grow and promote the fine arts and specifically the visual arts.
Well, I mean,
amongst other things.
And the fact that you do it all for no other reason than just to educate people and share your knowledge and
Correct.
Your love of the arts.
Correct.
Pure and unselfish reasons.
I try to be unselfish when it comes to sharing the wealth of knowledge.
I'm glad you do that in one area of your life.
No, you're a bitch.
All right, so ARTalk is going to further explore self-portraits, and we're going to be talking about the Dutch painter Rembrandt.
Rembrandt van Rijn.
Yes. The card says Rembrandt van Rijn is best known for his group portrait of a military company, the Night Watch. Rembrandt also created about 60 revealing self-portraits, ranging from when he was a young, prosperous portraitist to his lonely later years, marked by bankruptcy and loss. What would you like to do as a self-portrait, and what would it reveal about you?
This is kind of like the Salvador Dali thing we were just talking about a little bit. You know, like, what do you want to show? Do you want to be, like, theatrical, or do you want to be straightforward? Rembrandt was very straightforward. He was going to put every flaw, everything. Like, he was known for blemishes and all kinds of, you know, he was painting your portrait, he was showing it all. And he was going to show it how it really was in that moment. Regardless of anything else, he was authentic. Where Dali was going to show you a
embellished.
Yes, a kind of a showmanship of who he was. And different artists handle these things differently. I've done both. But I tend to lean more toward. I've created self-portraits where they're very straightforward and very realistic. I've also created self-portraits that are a little bit more on the embellished side, a little bit more of the pop surrealist side that I appreciate.
Well, let's talk about today. Today, if you were to do a self-portrait,
right,
40-some years old, at the stage you are in your life right now, what would your self-portrait be and why? And how would it best describe you, or what would you choose to focus on in that self-portrait?
I mean, again, I think that my self-portrait today would probably lean more toward that pop surrealist sort of side of me. I don't know what it would be or what it would include.
Well, that's the question, so you have to answer.
So to me, it's, I get that, but there are those people in the world that you say, hey, what's your favorite pizza? And people just say, oh, pepperoni or whatever. They just have because they realize that the statement doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares. But for me, it's a hard thing to answer because I feel like this is oh my gosh, there's a lot of weight to it. What's your favorite movie? Oh my God. There's no more pressure than that. What would you put in a self-portrait if you were going to make it today? Holy shit, I haven't been able to plan.
But there's no pressure. Just what's the first thing that comes to your mind? If you were going to put a paper down in front of you and draw a self-portrait, what would you put in there? I
would probably... God.
I mean, it can change tomorrow. I'm just saying, what is it today?
It would be what I'm sitting here doing this, drinking my coffee next to you, the so-called love of my life.
Yeah, depends on the moment.
It does depend on the moment. But today, that's what it would be.
Okay. Let's look at 2024. Self-portrait of 2024. Mine would be about change. It would just be this representation of all of the transitions and changes and we're going to talk about this moving forward in the podcast. We're not getting there yet, but like it would capture like the depth of change, like the not suffering, but like the hard times, the good times, the balance, all of those things, but mostly just change. And I feel like 2024 was a lot of change and transitions, mostly positive. And if they were negative, it was not a big deal. We learned from them, but that's what mine would be.
Mine would probably be, like, if I had to encapsulate 2024, it would be kind of like an American Gothic sort of scene, except it would have me as the farmer with the pitchfork.
With your bibs?
Yep, and you as the farmer's daughter next to me. But
probably eating like a huge slice of pizza or something like that. That seems to be like your favorite thing of taking a picture of me doing.
Usually you don't eat a big slice of pizza. Usually, like if I was to like you eating something, it wouldn't be that. It would probably be probably like when I think of you eating.
You have so many pictures of me diving into food, and burger is what comes to mind.
Burgers are a very common one that I like to take pictures of you eating. Pizza sometimes.
Okay, so back to what you would be in your bibs.
And you would be like in front of our house, and something like an American Gothic-y sort of spin, even though it is what it is.
What do you mean it is what it is?
Well, most people get the American Gothic thing wrong. They believe that American Gothic is the farmer and his wife, but it's not. And that's a misconception. And so, obviously, we would be perpetuating the myth as opposed to the brushstroke of what was reality. But
I think that's something you should create for our family picture. We can just hang it right there on our wall. This American Gothic that captures the littles and the adults and the houses and the who we are and that would be quite the interesting.
It would be.
Photograph. It would be a topic of conversation for people coming over to our house. If instead of our collage of family pictures, we just had this American Gothic photo of our family and just the craziness.
Well, I think it'd have to be like American Gothic is very like foreground heavy, where it's like all like right there. Where I think you'd have to pull back so you can see more of the background, more of the background noise of. My oldest kids, my youngest kids, your boys are, your family and my family and all of the
diversity.
Yeah, the messiness of trying to build a family that is very much a cobbled together thing. It's not really perfect, but that's okay. It's ours.
Right. I mean, that's what I think is cool about. I mean, we can just move right into our art vault conversation.
The art vault. Is there an art vault conversation for today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about.
Okay.
We're going to talk about. Well, let me tell you what we're going to talk about. The reason why I brought it up is because in it has a lot of symbolism, and so, like in my mind, that American Gothic scene. You would have just all these little different things, small things, symbolizing
the big picture.
Aspects, different aspects of our life. And that made me think of the art vault. Today we're going to talk about Peter Bruegel, the elder.
And the pronunciation, Bruegel is how I would pronounce it, but as we know that I've been called out for mispronunciations for years, so God only knows. I'm probably whatever.
Well, the piece of art that I'm referring to that involves a lot of symbolism is called Hunters in the Snow.
Hunters in the Snow, a fantastic work.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that piece of art. And
Hunters in the Snow was a piece that was done by Bruegel, a Northern Renaissance artist, created around 1565. This work is sometimes a little bit misunderstood. You see the three hunters, the dogs, going after some sort of small game, and in the background you see the people, and they're trying to get ready for the hog roast. And at any rate, the hunters themselves are ill-equipped. They have the wrong bags. They have the wrong weapons. They have the wrong stuff. And obviously, in looking at their body language, their posture, the dogs, they've been on the hunt for a while. They've bagged a small, like a fox or something. I've done a video on this, so you can go back into the archives and check out the old video that I did on this. But what I would say is that it's this duality of the hunters and the work and the survival, while people that are enjoying the winter, they're playing games on the ice, they're having fun, while the hunters are out struggling to put food on the table. There are those that have, there are those that have not. There are those that are going to enjoy the hog roast at the inn. There are those that are going to maybe have some small game to prepare for a meal. And that's true for every holiday season. You've got those that have everything that they want and a refrigerator full of food, and you have those that have to resort to other things to be able to provide for their family during a time when people are throwing away the excess. And it's really kind of a tricky time of year, and it has been since the Renaissance, and probably well before that too.
When you started talking about this, so I'm listening to this book called How to Winter or something like that. I'll have to look it up. But it's a book about like how some people, like thinking about that piece of art and the duality of it, as you said, like this, like there's so much encompassed in that one painting: the suffering, the hope, the different types of people, like, and what they're having or getting to endure or having to endure that day. And like this book talks about how different people, like there's a lot of people that, suffer with seasonal affective disorder, and see winter as such a negative thing. But then you go out into different countries and they love the winter. It's like winter gives you time to slow down. Winter is like comfy, cozy. They love and it's all perspective or perception, right? And we've talked about that before. But it's such a cool book, and this is such a cool piece of art. I think the thing that stuck out to me the most in that piece of art, like, I think what's cool is like everyone that looks at that piece of art will find something that resonates with them and that they love, or like, and for me it was the sign, the Saint, was it Saint Hubert or Saint Hubert or whatever. But so it's like this religious connotation, but then the sign is like falling down, so it's kind of like that emotion or that feeling of like kind of things being tough. But then I don't know, it just was like the symbolism of hope as well with the saint. And I loved that little piece in there where there's obviously a ton of different things that are symbolized and brought to attention in one piece of art. And that's just one, that was a series of like seasons, wasn't it?
Correct.
Different seasons. It wasn't just a winter thing.
Bruegel, when he put that together, he did a whole series of these depicting different times of the year. Some were the fall, some were the spring, some were the winter, the summer, whatever. We know the seasons. And he's going in there and putting his spin on the season, the winter season, in that way. Again, kind of showing the haves, the have-nots, the positives and the negatives of.
So all of them are just as like.
Yeah, they're all kind of landscapey. They're all they're showing people, but it's kind of pulled back in that same sort of way, where like American Gothic is really zoomed in and tight with one very specific couple, where this is pulled back and you see the people on the ice, you see the people with the preparing the hog, you see the people that are the hunters, you see these different groups and the different roles that people are playing at the same time. and different life experiences, different things that are happening within their worlds. And again, this has been happening forever, where the reality of the nobility is not the reality of the peasant.
So in each season that he captures, it's a very similar vibe or very similar, like...
I mean, in each of these works, he's telling a different story. It's not the same thing over and over again. It's not always the duality of life or whatever. Sometimes it's a different story. He's
not capturing the duality of things in the spring one or the summer. It's something completely different. It's just whatever captured his attention in that.
To some degree, yes.
What was he particularly known for, like type of art?
That's what he was known for, like landscapes, parables, like stories that would tell like a lesson. So when somebody sees it, the intention was that somebody's going to see that. They're going to see, different people have different phases of life, and the world at that time was largely illiterate, and so that's how during the Renaissance people were more interested in what's called humanism, where it's like instead of being so focused on the religious sides of life during the Gothic time period, during medieval times, the Dark Ages, as we might also know that time period, people were kind of going away from, the religious stuff is important. We're still going to make religious scenes and whatnot, but we're also going to make things that are about us as humans on Earth, not just religious figures, but the common people that are walking around. And that's where he was really more famous, more known.
Was it hard for him to make, like, so during that transition, was that not as popular, that type of art? Or?
No, it was pretty much, I wouldn't say it was unheard of, but it was very unpopular. It was not typical for an artist to focus on the commoner, the peasant, who wants a painting of a bunch of peasants, exactly. And who's going to buy it? Is some poor person going to be able to buy that painting and put it up in their house? They don't got any money to buy that. So he was making it more for posterity, more for a reflection of this is the life and the world that we live in, as opposed to I'm going to make this painting and make $1 million, type of a thing. So,
was he financially, did he do well?
I don't believe he was destitute, but he wasn't Michelangelo Buonarroti. He wasn't like a multi-billionaire, but he was able to provide for his family. He was able to live comfortably. Even to the degree that he had children that went into the same profession. He trained them to be artists, and it became a family business of sorts. So
Rembrandt. So I always thought, just kind of reverting back to our art talk, I always thought that Rembrandt was very rich, made a lot of money. But reading about this, he went into severe, terrible poverty at the end of his life. Did he ever come out of that?
No, he died with nothing.
Because why?
Because he was when it came to money, he was a dumbass.
Okay.
He made piles and piles and piles of money, but he spent piles and piles and piles of money on a house he couldn't afford, on clothes he couldn't afford. He filled his house full of artwork and trinkets that he couldn't afford.
Right.
And so he had piles of stuff, and then what? Okay, well then he started to go into bankruptcy. He was trying to sell stuff off. Eventually, when you owe the government money, they came in, they were taking his stuff, they were selling it off for pennies on the dollar just to try to recoup the money that he owed for all kinds of different debts. At that point in history, there was a such a thing. Maybe it still exists in Europe. I really don't know, but there was such a thing at that time called debtor's prison, where if you were in debt to such a degree, they would just put you in jail. And that's, the amount of time you got was based upon how much you owed to whoever you owed it. And his son and a significant other and other family members, close friends, were able to keep him out of debtor's prison by saying, look, he can make more money by making artwork and keeping him out of prison, and we will take, basically his son became in charge of his finances because he was such a dumbass when it came to how he was spending money, and his son died, and then he was really in a mess because he was mourning the loss of his son, and he didn't have anybody to help him take care of his financial ignorances. And he basically died homeless with some trinkets in his pockets and his art supplies, and that was basically it.
You think, like, we were having this conversation about athletes the other day, right? And like financial, like big athletes that make millions of dollars, right, and then end up being bankrupt at the end of their lives, or in debt and having to do different things. And that seems so, I don't know. That seems so odd that if you come from nothing, and then you become this rich millionaire, whatever, how can you not be responsible and respectful about, like, I guess maybe he didn't start. Well, maybe Rembrandt started. Did he start from rich? Like, did he have rich parents or no? So he started from nothing. You'd think you'd be humble and respect the, like, where you came from, and not. But I guess money can do that to you. But
I think that's the trend. I think that, if you look at like professional athletes today, or people that win the lottery, they say that the number one, like, most people that win the lottery are going to go bankrupt because they overextend themselves. They think, oh my gosh, I just got $100,000. I'm going to go buy a thing, and they don't realize, oh, I got to pay taxes on that thing, or I've got to,
right,
the other pieces that go along with owning that thing. Where if you own one pair of shoes, you don't really have to think about what pair of shoes you're going to put on.
Okay, this is kind of a tangent, but do you think that is consistent throughout history, or do you think that happens so much now because of the lack of education we have around, like, money and financial and responsibility with the kids growing up in, like, school or home or whatever?
I think that it's one of those things where financial literacy historically has not been taught. People, they come into money, and if you come from money, you know how to make money, and you know how to keep your money. And if you don't come from money, then it's like, oh, I got money, and then you squander it and you lose it. And I think that one of the best things that most of the schools that I've been a part of over the past 20 years have gone to a thing where they're teaching financial literacy. They're teaching kids, here's how a CD works. Here's how an IRA works. Here's how you can invest your money in a safe way. If you have a savings account, if you have a checking account, here's how you manage that. One of the things that, and both of my oldest children have, been able to learn quite a bit from those types of programs at school, because they certainly didn't learn it from me, and I didn't learn it I never took a class like that, and I think I probably, earlier in my life, had I been a little bit more equipped on how to do things with finances and things like that, I probably would be a lot more well off today, but I didn't have that opportunity. I think that that's one of the things that is really shifting. I think that there are those professional athletes, those professional people that they do things. I was listening to Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart was talking about how he goes to comedians or various people that didn't have any money, and he will pull them aside and he'll say, look, here's how you keep your money. Here's how you make your money make money. And trying to take people under his wing that came from the same sort of background that he came from, so that they don't fall into the same trends that so many people have fallen into, where they have wealth and they lose it. Rembrandt did this. He had no money. He came from no money. He came from nowhere. He built himself up from nothing, and he had piles of money and piles of resources. He had the world by its tail, and he messed it up, all because he had no idea of how to do it. Nobody took him aside and said, look, here's how you do it right. If you want to buy these things, that's cool, but here's how you have to do it smart, so that you don't squander all of your wealth on something that you can't afford and you can't maintain. Because he couldn't maintain the spending, he couldn't maintain the lifestyle that he wanted to present, that he was living. And had he had that person, had he had that person that would have pulled him aside and said, hey, look, here's how you do it, he probably wouldn't have ended up where he ended up at the end of his life. But as a matter of fact, when he passed away, they couldn't even bury him. They couldn't afford to put him in the ground and put a headstone. So he was buried in an unmarked grave because they couldn't afford to put a headstone on it. One of the most renowned, famous artists in all of art history didn't have enough money or whatever to an estate to be able to afford for him to put a rock in there that had his name on it. Like nothing. And eventually the people of the community where he lived put money together to be able to put a headstone on his grave, because he couldn't do it for himself.
What about Dali? Just, I know we've talked about Peter Bruegel and Rembrandt. What about Dali?
Dali was very wealthy. He had multiple museums with his own name on it.
That's right. He bought the hotel.
And and he ended up.
He was creative with his financial endeavors. It seemed like.
Yeah, he was pretty smart with money. Again, he's coming from a family that was good at money. They were good at saving money and keeping money and having wealth. He was born wealthy and he died wealthy. He had people and he had a knowledge of, here's how you gain wealth and here's how you keep it. And he was able to keep it. And he's actually buried in one of his art museums in Barcelona, I believe. His museum there he's got a little crypt where he's buried in the museum.
Well, I loved learning about the different artists today and just kind of a little bit about each of their lives. We hope that you liked the episode too. We hope that you hit like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed what we put together here. And anything else you want to add?
No, I just appreciate everybody for watching and subscribing and watching along. You can always go to redbubble.com. I've got in all of the things, but you can check out the merch. That's, little things, but it also gets the word out, more so than anything. If you know of people that like this sort of content, they like art, they like conversations about it. And if you have questions, if you have things that you want to see come from the podcast or from the regular Art 101s or the whatever, make sure you drop a line and communicate those things with us, and we can embed that into the
conversations moving forward. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for watching.
Have a good day.